Earlier today, the Biden administration announced that basketball star Brittney Griner would be coming home after a prisoner exchange. You'll remember her. She's the WMAL player who trashed America, took a knee during the national anthem, got arrested in Moscow for marijuana possession, and was sentenced to jail. And she became a cause celeb. And now she's coming home. But at what cost? Joining us right now is Tony Shaffer. He's a retired colonel for the United States Army, also a CIA-trained intelligence officer. Tony, tell me about this guy we're giving back to the Russians, because it doesn't sound like an even... Listen, I'm happy to have any American coming home here, and I'm happy for Brittney Griner's family, but my gosh, this guy that we're giving back to him sounds like a real bad dude.
He's a bad dude, Larry. Thanks for having me. And this guy is the worst of the worst. He was clearly, when he was arrested in Thailand years ago on the arms charges, he was an asset of the Russian government. The Russian Republic is restrictive on what they can sell to bad folks. So he's the guy that does it for them. You know, it's like, oh, we don't want to not sell. We want to have this guy do it. So let's strip away all the different flourishes. We're trading away a woke basketball player for a military asset that's going to be put back on the battlefield instantly by Vladimir Putin. This at a time we're technically at a state of war. Larry, this meets the aid and comfort to the enemy definition, as far as I'm concerned, by the Biden administration, helping Putin get back and do some things he was doing before. So
This guy was arrested. He was arms dealing, and the people who were trying to acquire arms were going to be killing DEA agents, if I remember
that's
right.
right. Well, and Al Qaeda terrorists, right?
So he's back on the battlefield now. He's basically ready to go back and engage, and Americans could be killed because of this.
He's the guy, Larry, who was dealing under the table to all the groups who want to kill Americans, that the Russians don't want to admit they're killing Americans. So why would you give them an asset who was doing that before back at the very time the Russians are going to start testing our resolve regarding Ukraine? It's just not a good thing. And remember two other things real quick. First, Larry, not only was Paul Whelan, a Marine, Iraq veteran, left behind in this, another guy named Mark Fogel, a teacher, who was arrested on very similar charges to Brittney Griner summer before last, apparently because he's just a teacher and this is just a Marine. This didn't rise to the level of interest to say, if you want Bout back, we want all these folks back. It just, again, tells me that this was all very much focused on getting a woke point on the board by the Biden administration versus the real downsides to national security and morality.
Yeah, because this has been speculated by a lot of analysts. In fact, people who were celebrating this news this morning for Brittney Griner made a point to say that she is a gay Black woman. And it just sounds like, oh, she checks certain boxes, so we're going to prioritize that. Exactly. Paul Whelan, who is not a gay Black woman, he is a retired Marine, though. He put out a statement. He said, "I'm greatly disappointed that more has not been done to secure my release, especially as the 4-year anniversary of my arrest is coming up. I was arrested for a crime that never occurred. I don't understand why I'm still sitting here." And that's very important, too. The fact that he's been incarcerated in Russia for 4 years. There used to be this sort of ethic going all the way back to the Vietnam War, John McCain and the Hanoi Hilton, first in, first out. You don't jump the line like this, but apparently the Biden administration is fine with this.
So to that point, Larry, look, this is very much like the Cold War. We're talking about essentially spy versus spy. They traded folks earlier this year. And in this case, during the Cold War, based on the history lessons I've observed, you always traded essentially a pawn for a pawn, a bishop for a bishop. Here we traded basically a king for a pawn that essentially has no value on the chessboard, but clearly was meant to send a signal to those who the administration is trying to pander to. And yes, I feel terrible for the family of Whelan. And by the way, the other thing I'm just going to say, I hope you don't mind, is that this was done basically under the table using some of the worst folks. the Biden administration actually used the Saudis to help perpetrate this negotiation. Now, I know a little bit about stuff like this because I was part of a negotiation to get Bout Prisoner back. I was part of one of the secret options, so I know how this is done. You deal with people you don't necessarily want to. I had to deal with the ISI and Hamid Gul, but in this case, you're talking about Biden going against his own ethical judgment, saying that Khashoggi's death, murder by the Saudis, was the worst thing ever. Yet now here they are dealing with the Saudis on this very issue.
Well, his stated ethical judgment, he said what he had to say
Yes.
politically because Khashoggi was the big problem. But now that he's in power, let's unpack this a little bit.
Sure.
Just a month ago, the Biden administration decided they would not allow for any charges against the Saudi royal family who has been implicated in the death of this journalist Khashoggi.
That's right.
Was this part of the deal? Listen, we're not going to press this Khashoggi thing with you. You help us get Brittney Griner out from the Russians.
So apparently so, because 2 days before the events now we're seeing transpire, Larry, the Biden administration dropped the lawsuit against the Saudi royal family over the Khashoggi thing. Is there a link?
Wow.
Probably. So the White House
timing is impeccable, at least. The timing stinks.
Absolutely. And the White House has been asked about it. They refused to comment on specifics, but they did say other foreign powers were involved. It's very clear by the way, the folks who did the trade said the Saudis were the ones who helped. So this is coming from another Arab nation that said this.
Let's go back. You mentioned the Bout Prisoner situation. This is a pattern of behavior for Joe Biden, who was the vice president during that, but also just the infrastructure, the team. He's got the same national security advisors now that Barack Obama had during the Bout Prisoner trade.
That's correct.
And you're right, this smacks of that. They get a photo op. They get a great political benefit from bringing an American home. But what they do to get that American back, it really does put more Americans in harm's way, it appears.
So this has reinforced the worst behavior. Think about this, Larry. Now they know that if you grab Americans, if you want to grab an American that's really going to get their attention, grab a superstar, grab someone who's in the public eye. So you've reinforced now the idea of endangering other athletes and people of note going overseas. That's what they've done. They've made it very clear. This is the bright, shiny object we want to grab. With that said, on the Bergdahl thing, look, we've talked about this offline. I've acknowledged this publicly. I was in charge of the option to negotiate with Hamid Gul to pay him $10 million, just saying, to get the Pakistani intelligence service to then get the Haqqani network to cough him up, and we'd get him back. Now, that was a bad option, but the option they went with was far worse, to trade away the 5 Taliban guys as a part of the agreement to get him back. Now, remember, we traded 5 guys, Larry, 5 warlords who went back on the battlefield to do things for Bergdahl, another really bad trade. By the way, Bergdahl was a defector and a traitor. Right. So just saying, it was not a good trade.
I interviewed people from that platoon that had to go out searching for Bergdahl after he had defected to the Taliban. And these guys had lost comrades. People died in the search for Bergdahl, who had defected. 10. And then we ended up treating him like a hero, bringing him back and putting 5 Taliban generals back on the battlefield. It's a disturbing pattern of behavior. But here's the thing, Tony, not a lot of people on cable news tonight are going to be having this conversation because it's politically toxic to call into question this deal. Because as we mentioned, Brittney Griner, I mean, heroic figure, right? She checks all the boxes and even protested against our national anthem when she was making a good load of money to play basketball.
She took a knee. And that's I'm sorry. That's disrespectful. And I don't think we should have made the effort we did. I'm sorry. That's the truth. That's the way I see it.
And again, and that's another thing in common with Bout Prisoner. We got to leave it there. Tony Shaffer, thanks for shedding some very interesting and inside light on this interesting story. I'll leave it at that. Interesting. Again, happy for Brittney Griner and her family, but was this in the best interest of our nation? More to come on O'Connor Tonight.